Coming in at number 10, we have Justice League War. Now, even though DC hasn't been able to get their footing when it comes to live action superhero movies, they definitely have made some amazing films in the animated world. And Justice League War is a reimagining of how the Justice League is formed in the fight against Darkseid. This movie starts without any of the heroes knowing each other, so they do that classic thing when a bunch of heroes end up in the same place and no one knows each other. They fight. Now, in this fight, Superman really does own Batman. Everything that Batman tries to throw at him gets stuffed without even coming close to slowing Superman down. So why did I put it on this list? Well, the thing that brings the fight to the end is right before Superman is about to punch the Dark Knight into another dimension, Batman calls out Superman by his real name, Clark Kent, stopping him dead in his tracks. This is what makes Batman so incredible. In this rendition of the DC universe, he was the first person in the world to figure out who Superman was, and through his powerful intellect, he took complete control of the situation. He had that trump card in his pocket the whole fight. So one could argue that the entire time Batman looks like he's getting owned was just him studying Superman so he could learn how to fight him better. He could have called this out at any point. Also, there's a reason why I put this one at number 10. It's because he kind of does get beat up. Coming in at number 9 is Batman vs. Superman. Even though this movie was a massive stinky egg, it still had a Batman vs. Superman fight that ended with Clark Kent begging for his life and asking Batman to save his mom in the infamous Martha scene. I'm looking past how much this movie missed the mark to highlight the fact that Superman came into this fight very unprepared and Batman was the complete opposite. He had the kryptonite dust to turn Superman into basically a regular person, and he laid into him with some iron-plated right hooks. This all capped off with a kryptonite spear that left a nice slice wound in Superman's face. Imagine how this movie would have ended if their moms had different names. Coming in at number 8, we have New 52 Batman, number 36. One of my favorite things in the DC universe is when Batman is forced to take on a group of heroes, especially when it's the Justice League. It's always interesting to see how the writers will create new ways for Batman to earn his keep amongst the gods. In this issue, members of the League have been turned into crazed Joker versions of themselves, and one by one they go toe-to-toe with Batman, each one of them unable to beat the Bat. Batman is able to pull this off through a giant mech suit that he's created just for this special occasion that has a specific tactic to beat each one of these heroes. Now, when Superman shows up, the mech suit reveals that it has microscopic red suns in the fists that will drain Soup's powers while he gets his head caved in. But the Man of Steel blasts past these fists, he pulls Bats from the mech and starts flying him into space. Right when it seems like there's no hope for our caped crusader, he spits a wad of kryptonite gum into Superman's face, giving Bats the last-minute victory. This one wasn't a destruction of Superman, but he had to fight the main members of the League beforehand, so I'm gonna give him this one. And the gum was such a cool Batman trick.
Kitty Pryde has something of an advantage on Deadpool in that his attacks tend to require a target that's, tangible. If he can't actually hit her, he'll have a hard time beating her. On the other hand, her ability to change her tangibility would allow her to mess with Deadpool, similar to how she fought Wolverine in What If Astonishing X-Men. While she wouldn't really be able to kill him, it wouldn't be much trouble to incapacitate him. Unless he teleported away, in which case, yay, he ran away and she beat him. Plus, more recently, she phased through galaxies and transcended the multiverse, so she could probably figure out a way to beat some annoying guy in a suit. Number 6, Moonstone Ms. Marvel. This one may be a bit controversial because technically it was a supervillain acting as a superhero, but she actually tried to be heroic for a time, so I say it counts. Plus, it's a funny story. After Deadpool stole a bunch of telepathic babies from her, she chased him down. Luckily, Deadpool had his guns with him. Unluckily, he forgot she was bulletproof, and the rest of the fight didn't go so well. He latched onto her, but she realized she could just fly up and drop him, and she did, and Deadpool can't fly. He's really great at falling though, but yeah, when your abilities nullify a huge part of Deadpool's arsenal, read his guns, you have a pretty good chance of beating the guy. Number 5, Crypto the Superdog. I know it's kind of weird to include Crypto but not Superman, but hear me out. First of all, in all honesty, there's a good chance that Superman is just too fast and would beat Wade so easily it isn't even worth talking about. But also, Deadpool could have kryptonite weapons in his satchel, which could stop Superman from beating him. However, one thing that Crypto has that Superman doesn't is the cuteness of being a dog. Particularly after his time with Dogpool, I suspect Deadpool would be much less okay with fighting a dog than fighting Superman, and I think this reluctance could stop him from hurting Crypto, or at least make him pause long enough to let the dog have his way with him. This is an entry on the list that isn't based on any sort of history with them fighting, but was kind of a shower thought that I thought I should put in. Number 4, Thor. In Deadpool Annual number 1, Deadpool was after Daredevil while being bugged by Madcap. This was a fight that led to the epic Deadpool-Madcap combination, and it was not even close. Thor absolutely wiped the floor with Deadpool, which is understandable given that Thor is a freaking god who can create lightning bolts. And the worst part is, Thor wasn't even trying. Daredevil just said, lightning them, they're healing factor guys, and Thor went, as you wish, and zap, there they go. Kind of a cheap choice since Thor is obviously so much more powerful than Wade, but it's too clear a choice to leave out.
Coming in at number 3, we have Superman Red Sun, a one-off comic that runs with the idea of what if Superman landed in the Soviet Union instead of America. This comic is amazing, and one of the best parts is when Russian Batman puts a beat down on Superman. He lures Superman into a trap that has him surrounded by red sun lights, and then hits him with everything in the Krav Maga handbook. Superman actually almost dies in this fight, but then Wonder Woman swoops in to save the blue Boy Scout from an early death, and then Batman actually commits suicide to avoid being caught. This would have probably been number 1 on the list if Batman didn't get help from Lex Luthor to pull off this plan. Coming in at number 2, we have The Dark Knight Strikes Again. This is the follow-up comic to the famous Dark Knight Returns, and I have to say, it's not as good, but it can be hard to follow up one of the best comics ever written. Well, in this comic, it has gone out that the Bat is back, and Superman goes to have a nice little chit chat with him. Also, if you don't know, in this universe, Batman, along with a lot of the other heroes, are very old, and Superman and Batman aren't anywhere close to friends anymore. So when Superman shows up at the Batcave, Batman unloads a wagon of whooping on him. He has a series of devices set up in the cave that are just there to take down Superman. Flash and Green Arrow are both there to give Batman a helping hand at putting Superman down, and this is all topped off with one of the coolest Superman beating tools ever, kryptonite gauntlets. This entire fight leaves Superman a bloody mess. And coming in at the number 1 spot is Injustice 2. So basically the same stuff is going on as Injustice 1, but this time we have even more heroes and villains, and Brainiac gets involved. Now I will say that there are 2 endings to this game. One of them has Superman win and merge with Brainiac to become one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and he makes Batman his slave. But I put this as number 1 because if you make the choice to have Batman win, then Superman is depowered and Batman leaves him locked away in the Phantom Zone with no powers. Pretty much the biggest way you can destroy Superman.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Grey Hulk. One of the more badass versions of the Hulk was also the earliest. See, originally Stan Lee wanted the Hulk to be gray, but ink problems made him green. The Incredible Hulk made his first smashing appearance in 1962 when a teenager, Rick Jones, was about to be caught up in a gamma bomb test. Scientist Bruce Banner ran out and threw him to safety, but in doing so he himself was caught in said explosion, and in turn he was irradiated with radioactive particles, becoming the Grey Hulk. Our green guy, the main 616 Hulk, is referred to as the Savage Hulk, and Grey Hulk is said to be weaker. They made him an entirely different version in the comics to help explain the color change. They were both fighting to control Bruce. Things get spicy during Peter David's run when we meet Joe Fixit, this mobster Grey Hulk working at a casino. Imagine this guy asking you for your ID. I would bring 5 pieces and a passport, just to be safe. So intimidating. And his hat too, like he looks friendly, but he also looks like when he shakes your hand, he's gonna break all your knuckles. Number 9, Skulk. Coming to life in Doctor Strange Fate issue 1 back in 1996, Marvel's Bruce Banner combined with DC's Solomon Grundy. How fun. Another gray version, but a little more out there this time around. Solomon appeared right before Bruce Banner was caught in that gamma bomb explosion, so now the two ended up fusing together, creating Skulk. Skulk was taught by Doctor Strange Fate that in order to remain in human form, you need the assistance of magic. Black Widow's palm dances will not work in this universe, my friend. So Banner was like, alright, I'll work for you, just make sure I don't become that awful pale monster. Deal? Deal. Great, awesome. Skulk's last comic was in Lobo the Duck issue 1 just a year later. He died in the destruction caused by the Gold Kidney Lady. Yes, you heard me correctly. And before we list off some other fun versions of the Hulk, if you want to Skulk smash that like button, that would be lovely. Those clicks really do help us out a lot here. You all rock, now let's keep this list going. Number 8, Peter Parker. Looking now to the 2006 bullet point storyline, if you haven't already guessed from the title, this one's a superhero swap. We love those. Now this is a life where Uncle Ben, well, still died, but he died a lot earlier, so unfortunately he wasn't around to mentor Peter. Give him the whole with great power comes great responsibility rundown. So now Peter's stealing Jeeps, he's blasting Green Day and flipping off the elderly, just the complete opposite guy that we know and love. During the Jeep joyride, it ran out of gas, so Sneaky Pete went off to look for some more to help fill up. Now while he was searching, that's when he just happened to stumble across that gamma bomb test, and he didn't realize that he had this Hulk side to him until later on that night. His friends got in trouble, so they blamed Peter, and that's when he got really angry, and then he turned into the Hulk for the first time. It was nuts. Aunt May straight up had a heart attack. more than fair. After this point, retired Steve Rogers came back, suited up as Iron Man, and then began hunting him down. This universe is crazy. Peter Hulk killed Steve Rogers, and he didn't go down until Galactus arrived on Earth. Not a bad run.
At number 7, we have Ultimate Captain America, a character that probably wasn't intended to be read as weird when first created, but has since turned out to be a bit more of a unique interpretation of the character. Notably more destructive, assertive, and just a bit grumpier than most other interpretations of Steve Rogers, he could be seen as a different interpretation of American patriotism than more classical versions of the character take from. In another wild and tragic twist, this Cap's version of Red Skull is actually his literal son, the result of his last night with his World War II era girlfriend, Gail Richards. Completely unknown about by Steve and born after he was frozen in ice, the baby was taken by the military and grew up in foster care. Growing up with an inferiority complex, this child would eventually scar himself and become the criminal mastermind, the Red Skull. Talk about a messed up family, Steve. Coming in at number 6, it's Steve Rogers. No wait, it's Stephen Strange. No wait again, it's actually Steven Rogers, Soldier Supreme. In a pocket dimension known as Warp World, where every soul of the Marvel Universe has been merged with that of another, Doctor Strange and Captain America were DNA digivolved into the combined form of the Soldier Supreme. In this unique part of the multiverse, the superhuman experiments done by the Allies during World War II were achieved through magic instead of science, with the weak and scrawny Steven Rogers being taught the ways of dark magic and learning powerful sorcery. With a best friend known as Bucky Wong, a literal Winter Soldier after he becomes a ghost, this combo of characters is definitely a standout in a multiverse full of standouts. At number 5, we've got the alternate future showstopper of Danielle Cage, the Captain America of the future. The grown-up child of both Jessica Jones and Luke Cage on Earth 15061, Danielle has taken up the mantle of Captain America in a Manhattan where climate change makes flooding incredibly frequent and gangs roam the streets. With her own arch nemesis in the form of the Golden Skull, Danielle Cage is also one of the physically strongest Captain Americas throughout the multiverse, inheriting both the strength-based power sets of her parents and letting her yeet that red and blue shield as hard as it's ever been thrown before. Coming in at number 4, we've got a bit of a change of rank with Colonel America, aka Zombie Cap. In a world where an infected sentry brings a zombie plague from beyond the stars, and also where Steve Rogers has achieved the rank of Colonel and the presidency of the United States, America's hero is bidden along with many of the Avengers when they try to contain the sentry situation. The Colonel is even the one to eventually bite Spider-Man on the shoulder when the younger hero tries to help. This zombified version of Steve Rogers retains all of his powers and more, surviving with half of his brain exposed until he was finally defeated by his enemy the Red Skull during a final battle over who gets to devour the corpse of Galactus. Definitely some very, very weird stuff.
Getting close to the end, and in number 3, MCU Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers is depicted as a former US Air Force fighter pilot who was given superhuman abilities when a lightspeed engine test went wrong, and she was exposed to the cosmic energy of the Tesseract and subsequently transformed into a human-Kree hybrid known as Veers via blood transfusion. In 1995, on the Kree Empire's capital planet of Hala, Danvers, then known as Vers, suffered from amnesia and recurring nightmares involving an older woman, particularly as a former Air Force test pilot who acquired cosmic energy force powers from the Tesseract after an explosion that wiped her memory. So, you can kind of see where that was going. But I'm including this version of Captain Marvel not because she's weird, but because for some reason everyone seemingly hates this version. So much so that when I mentioned how the MCU Captain Marvel could beat the MCU Hulk since MCU Thanos beat him and she was going to beat MCU Thanos without, if he didn't have the Power Stone at least, everyone still got mad at me. And some still hate me to this day. You should have seen my DMs after that video went out. And still, sometimes I get messages about how some of these fans hate me, okay? All because of my little second video on the channel. And that's the reason I included this, so I can finally say my piece. Redemption is finally mine! Penultimately, in at number 2, Marvel. Marvel is the Captain Marvel of the Marvel Ultimate Earth, Earth 1610. For millennia, an ancient extraterrestrial race called the Kree have tracked and studied a mysterious planet-eating creature they called Galactus. Sounds like a Skyrim shout. The Supreme Intelligence restricted this knowledge to specially trained high-level Kree, fearing that if the true nature of Galactus became common knowledge, it would drive their race insane. Several years before Galactus was due to arrive in the Sol system, the Kree staged a covert observation mission on Earth, and Plus Commander Marvel underwent massive nanosurgery to appear human, going undercover as physicist Dr. Philip Lawson to investigate the human race. Growing fond of humans, Vel joined S.H.I.E.L.D.'s ACES program to speed up humanity's progress of the stars, helping to develop a zero-point energy source for manned spaceflight. On the day that the ACES-01 test article was going to be launched, the base was attacked by a Kree kill form with orders for Vel to aid humanities no further. Refusing, Vel just obliterated the kill form, but the effort left him powerless and he was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. After questioning by General Nick Fury and Captain Carol Danvers, Vel briefed them, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and Thor regarding the existence of Galactus and, kind of updated them on the whole situation. Finally, in at number 1, Actor Marvel. The man who would one day be known as the Captain was an ordinary but slightly stupid human from Brooklyn. He spent his life frequenting bars and getting into fights. As a child, his alcoholic mother hung his teddy bear from a noose, so yeah, that would kind of mess you up. However, after gaining his powers and joining the anti-traitor group known as Next Wave, the Captain would want to change his name. While looking into using the name of Captain Marvel, he actually found out about someone totally different from the Captain Marvel of Earth 616 that we know. Instead, he learned about an adult film star who was using that name. Yes, you heard me right. When trying to use the name of Captain Marvel, the Captain came across an adult film actor who was using this name. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the funniest versions of this character that there is. I don't care if it's not Carol Danvers or Marvel, but it's someone going by the name of Captain Marvel making adult movies. Okay? And you know that's gonna be a number 1 spot for me, hands down. Technically, there is an Earth where all the Marvel characters are adult stars. And the MCU is just one big adult film franchise, which I guess would make the Avengers movies giant.
Number 10, Tris Plover. Tris comes from a pretty dark future where all of humanity, it turns out, is living on a spaceship, destined to find a new home somewhere out in the cosmos to settle. The space vessel she lives on is known as Gotham, and she works as a farmer on the giant vessel. However, she ends up getting pursued by the authorities and decides to join the vigilante Batman. He tells her of the fact that there was a malfunction and their ship is actually now off course. Tris joins him as his Robin, and together the two of them manage to correct the ship's computer, putting them back on a proper course. Think WALL-E kind of, but if it were Batman and Robin teaming up to fix things instead of WALL-E and a reluctant Eve. Unfortunately, despite being a kind of cool apocalyptic future Robin, Tris still turned herself into the authorities in the end and was turned into fertilizer, after she realized that it would take over 300 years for the ship to arrive at their now correctly programmed destination. Yeah, that's gotta be a pretty depressing revelation. Number 9, Earth 2 Robin. The original Earth 2 Robin was an alternate version of Dick Grayson, who never became Nightwing but instead continued on with the mantle Robin well into his adulthood. He fought crime alongside the daughter of Batman and Catwoman, Helena Wayne, also known as the vigilante Huntress. Being that Earth 2 Robin was from the Golden Age, he's got a lot of weird knowledge and skills because, well, Golden Age comics, including medicinal and surgical skills. Thanks, Batman. He also was technically the original Robin, despite now being considered an alternate due to a reorganization of the continuity following Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then again during Infinite Crisis, and then again following Flashpoint. Wow, that's a lot of resets. Though this version of Robin wouldn't be around to see all those resets, as despite his long list of skills, he died attempting to protect the newly formed Earth during the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. So he only lives on at this point in our hearts and in our old mags. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more bat lists, I want to give you those bat lists, so be sure to let us know that you like them by clicking that like button, and hey, why not share this list while you're at it? Help us find the people out in the world that also love Robins. Number 8, Robin 89. This alternate version of Robin made his first appearance in issue number 1 of Batman 89, a new limited series that takes place in the Burtonverse. one of my favorite verses. As a nod to the fact that Marlon Wayans was set to play Robin in the Burtonverse before Tim Burton left the Batman films, this version of him is black, which I think is pretty awesome. Initially, Marlon would have played Robin in the sequel, but the team actually decided instead to have him first appear in the third film. You know, the one that never happened, as Joel Schumacher then took over, introducing his own version of Robin in Batman Forever. We haven't seen much of this comic book version of what Marlon Wayans' Robin could have been, but what we did get is to see the mysterious figure who is Robin, likely still named Richard Grayson in this reality, take on Batman near the end of issue number 1, and hold his own against the Dark Knight. And so for that alone, and the fact that I'm really excited for Batman 89, I felt like I should include him. So hopefully you agree with me and you're also excited about Batman 89. Or if you're not excited, hey, let me know in the comments. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, you know what I mean? Number 7. Batman 60s Show. Catwoman in the Batman live-action 1960s show became an even greater, bolder, and more deadly villain as time went on throughout the course of the series. Sure, she also happened to have a romantic spark with Batman, but that didn't as often get in the way of her dastardly deeds. And even with her becoming more and more of a romantic interest as time went on, when Eartha Kitt stepped in to take the role after Julie Newmar left the show, becoming Catwoman in the 3rd season, she really only served to elevate the villainous side of Selina Kyle even more. I feel like Eartha Kitt also helped to make it fun and sexy for female characters like Catwoman to just be evil, unapologetically evil. Being bad can be fun after all. Number 6. Madam Cat. Madam Cat hails from the Amalgam universe, which over at DC is given the reality number of 496 and over at Marvel is given the reality number of 9602. In this reality, Selina Luthor was the daughter of Green Skull, aka Lex Luthor, and Lois Lane. She was basically raised to be evil, despite the fact that her mother did try to shield her and protect her from her father's villainy. As a result, Lois was killed by Green Skull, who then raised Selina to be just as vile and trained her in the ranks of Hydra. Despite her villainous past though, Selina does end up betraying her father in the end and seemingly switching sides to the side of good, before perishing in an explosion. At least it seemed like she perished in an explosion. Madam Cat is a combination of DC's Catwoman and Marvel's Madam Hydra. Number 5. Deceased. In the world of Deceased, Selina Kyle becomes infected with the anti-life equation and becomes insanely violent and zombie-like. Although those infected aren't really in control of themselves and simply are compelled to behave the way they do, not specifically having intentions of their own, I think we can still consider them to be pretty evil. I mean, they're basically zombies. Zombies are monsters, and monsters generally fall on the side of evil as opposed to good. Except for good monsters, that is, like zombies who just, want to fall in love, or the lovable monsters of Monsters, Inc. In this reality, Catwoman ends up defeated by Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy after she has succumbed to the anti-life equation virus. Or I guess just the anti-life equation. Just feels weird to not call it a virus because they're basically like zombies, Number 4. Catwoman 2. Catwoman 2 is Catwoman's kind of unofficial predecessor from the Kingdom Come universe. Here, Catwoman herself, Selina Kyle, has retired from the world of vigilantism and thievery to start her own successful cosmetics company and brand. And successful indeed it was. She presumably spends most of her time running the multi-billion-dollar company, and I guess just chilling and spending her money. Catwoman 2, on the other hand, uses Selina's former mantle, but is one of the new heroes to appear on the scene, whose methods are actually looked down upon by the older heroes. She follows the brutal and misguided example of the Man of Tomorrow, the villain, Magog. Number 3. Robin King. Robin King is actually not an alternate version of any of our Robins from the main continuity. Gasp! Instead, Robin King is an alternate version of Bruce Wayne, who was inspired by a Robin's cheerful song at his parents' funeral in this reality. It was the young Bruce Wayne here who killed his parents due to the fact that he was inherently prone to violence and homicidal tendencies, even from a young age. Because this version of Robin is so murderous and dangerous, he could definitely be one of the most powerful Robins out there. Also, if you thought Jason had at times questionable morals or methods, the Robin King truly just blows him out of the water for that. Number 2. Dick Grayson. I think Dick has proven to be the most capable and powerful version of Robin that we've ever seen. This is likely thanks to a combination of Nightwing's personality and years of experience, considering that he was the very first Robin and has been around since the early days of Batman's vigilante career. He's also super flexible. I think he's also the most flexible Robin, which I know y'all might be thinking that doesn't equal power, but trust me, flexibility is hard and it is very powerful, I think. Do not underestimate someone who's very flexible. Dick even proved himself as a good fit as Bruce's heir when he himself took up the cape and cowl, filling in as Batman after he was presumed dead, but was really just MIA. Nightwing brings to the table not only his skills as a fighter and acrobat, but also his sharp wit as a perceptive and smart detective, as well as his forensic skills, or as I said once, his chemist skills. I called him a chemist once and people were like, that's not a thing. But he does have forensic skills, which is chemistry, so I feel like it still kind of goes hand in hand. I defend it. I would say when it comes to all-around Robin power, Nightwing is one of the most balanced, which generally gives him a leg up in comparison to the other Robins who tend to dominate in a specific area but usually lack somewhat in another. Basically, they're usually really good at like one or two things, but everything else they're fluctuating. And I feel like Nightwing is pretty much like here, like he's just really good at a lot of stuff. Number 1. Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayer is probably the most powerful of the Robins that we've seen so far. He's also definitely the most metal. He comes from the Dark Multiverse, more specifically, the Dark Multiverse Dark Knight's Metal series. He actually sort of has powers as well, coming with an electric guitar that also happens to be an axe. He plays it with a kryptonite pick, using its sound to create sonic blasts and even energy constructs. And okay, yeah, so he doesn't necessarily have powers, but he has a powerful weapon, so I'm gonna count it, because it's like magically powerful. Dragon Slayer's Nightwing, aka Richard Grayson, is definitely the most badass of all the Robins here, and despite his very brief appearance, is in theory the most powerful. At least his brief appearance by comparison to some of the other ones. Although Tris Plover was also brief. Number 10. Sentry. And the circle of people getting ripped in half continues. It's a vicious circle indeed, let me tell you. Sentry is often actually a perpetrator of this kind of gruesome and brutal death, but this time around he was on the receiving half of this murder method. This all went down during the King in Black event. When Null first arrived on Earth, Sentry was one of the first heroes to attempt to stand up against him and defeat him. Being the Sentry, he egotistically assumed he would easily be powerful enough to defeat Null. While Sentry tried to rip him in half, it was Null who managed to get a solid enough grip on Bob Reynolds to tear him asunder. Sentry would then be escorted by Valkyrie, aka Jane Foster, to the halls of Valhalla, and while on their way there, another shocking revelation would come to light. That some of the Valkyries were still alive, trapped but alive, and upon being found by Jane and Sentry and freed, were able to kind of return once more. Pretty cool. It should be noted too that Sentry's death and defeat was also so shocking because it took place in issue number 1 of the King in Black series, in essence being one of the defeats that kicked off this event.
Elektra. You could say that Elektra was a victim of the well-known Daredevil villain Bullseye, but you could also say she was a victim of Frank Miller's gripping and at times very dark writing. In issue number 181 of Daredevil Volume 1, we watch Elektra and Bullseye square off in a bloody battle, which ultimately ends in Bullseye spearing Elektra right through the stomach and out her back. It's a really brutal event that changes Daredevil as a character entirely from that point on. And it's important to remember that in 1982, which is when that issue was released, a death like this for such a well-known hero wasn't quite as common as what we might be used to today. And it's not like she was resurrected again either, which is usually how this type of thing goes. She is completely done in the Daredevil timeline, only showing up in her own limited series and a couple other comics here and there.
Number 8. Batman. Although it doesn't seem surprising on paper, when Batman was seemingly killed by Darkseid, it caught a lot of folks off guard. That is because Batman is such a mainstay. He isn't a character that dies often, and definitely not in a way that feels as permanent as this if he does die. Although the idea of Batman being killed by Darkseid might not seem that surprising, because I mean Darkseid's pretty OP, Batman actually had a pretty decent plan for taking the villain out, and actually was successful using a Radion bullet. Batman successfully hit Darkseid in the chest, but not before his Omega beams could do their work. Although it seemed as though Batman was obliterated as a result of being hit by the Omega beams, it turned out that what had actually happened was a power called the Omega Sanction, which is also kind of what Darkseid's Omega beams are. And those had been used to transport Batman back through time, so he would return, but not before having weird time travel adventures.
Coming in at number 7, we have The Dark Knight Returns. This is probably the most iconic Batman vs Superman fight, mostly because it takes place in one of the greatest comic books of all time. In this, we have Superman in a very weakened state from stopping a nuke from crashing into the United States, and Batman is in the most old geezer state we have seen him outside of Batman Beyond. Batman really pulls out all the stops in this fight. He has the classic robotic batsuit that was stolen for that garbage fire movie Batman vs Superman. He has help from his newest Robin sidekick. He blasts Superman with an entire city worth of electricity, and he has Green Arrow hit Superman with a special kryptonite dust that took millions of dollars to make. This leaves Superman human, with Batman busting his face before he fakes his own death. Now, if we go back and watch this fight, yes, Superman is holding back the whole time, so it's hard to say Batman destroys him, but this had to be part of Batman's plan. He knew Clark would pull his punches against an old man and an old friend, thus leaving him vulnerable to the kryptonite dust attack. And in the end, Batman wasn't looking to kill Superman, he just wanted to send a message, which he definitely did. Coming in at number 6, we have Armageddon 2001. Let's mess around with timelines a little. Armageddon 2001 is an alternate future where Supes has gone rogue and starts killing off heroes left, right, and center, along with destroying any military defense in the world that might fight against him. This means that the president has one guy to turn to, and it's good old Batman. Batman again uses a superpowered suit, but this time he has kryptonite on hand from the get-go and really beats down Superman until he's literally green from kryptonite poisoning. Coming in at number 5, we have Injustice, an alternate universe fighting game where DC Universe characters throw down in matchups that don't make any sense, but it's still cool as hell. Yeah, sign me up. Not only are these games made by NetherRealm Studios, the same people who make the fantastic Mortal Kombat games, but the games actually have some of the best story modes in a fighting game ever. The game takes place in an alternate universe where Superman has gone rogue after Lois Lane is killed by the Joker. This causes him to become a tyrant, which eventually leads to a clash between him and Batman, where Batman whoops his butt and then locks him away in a Red Sun prison. Coming in at number 4, we have the Tower of Babel. Once again, breaking into the world of Batman, playing out how he would beat down every member of the League. In this wonderful comic, these contingency plans for taking out separate members of the League get into the wrong hands, and the plan to take out Superman is a secret new kryptonite that Batman has created. The crazy thing is about this new kryptonite, it doesn't make Superman weaker, it actually makes him stronger. This new kryptonite that Batman has cooked up makes Superman's skin translucent. This makes his ability to absorb solar energy increase to the point where Superman can no longer control his powers and becomes a threat to everyone around him. Eventually, this leads to Superman going into hiding. Now, this isn't a straight up fight, but Batman's plan worked flawlessly and he for sure destroyed Superman.
At number 3 is Superman. Back in 1992, a comic book called The Death of Superman was published, in which Superman is actually killed by Doomsday. The battle rages on for quite a while against this hyper-adaptable villain, with Superman showing serious signs of exhaustion as Metropolis gets more and more damaged. This being a multi-issue publication, the actual death of Superman takes place in issue number 75, which is quite a while into the series. And while it's easy for us to find that issue online today, back then, readers were waiting months to see what happened to their favorite Kryptonian. I mean, with a title like that and leaving the event right to the end, I sort of rank this as more of a publicity stunt than anything else, but whether there is marketing involved or not, there's no doubt that this event was a shock to fans, who at the time were unsure if they'd ever see another Superman comic again. Thankfully though, but also sort of expectedly, DC then released Reign of the Supermen, which chronicled the return of the hero and is known to have sold just about the same number of copies as The Death of Superman.
Number 2, Green Arrow. Green Arrow's death was quite startling because he was basically kind of the person behind it. Rather than do something, he sort of just let himself be killed and defeated. And I know there's probably going to be Oliver Queen fans in the comments. They're going to be like, no, he sacrificed himself. But look, it just seems a little silly to me, okay? While beaten by the enemy, he also just kind of gave up. This all went down when Oliver Queen was blown up by a bomb that threatened to detonate upon arriving in Metropolis. Rather than let that happen, happen or give up his arm, which was stuck in the detonator case or chamber, he decided to just surrender and sacrifice himself to save innocent people, allowing himself and the plane he was in to basically be blown up. The really crazy part of this story is that Superman was right there, and while he wasn't coming up with any amazing ideas, other than one that would cause Green Arrow to lose his arm in exchange for his life, which Green Arrow was definitely not willing to do, Soup still likely could have done something else that would save Metropolis and Ollie, and likely have allowed him to keep his arm as well, because after all, this is Superman we're talking about. If only he'd had the time to think of something better. It is hard to think of things on the spot, especially when, you know, a bomb is about to explode, so fair enough.
Finally, at number 1, we have Peter Parker. I only don't call him Spider-Man in this entry because firstly, this is the Earth 1610 Peter Parker, and secondly because he's from the Ultimate Spider-Man series. And either way, the Spider-Man mantle is still very much alive, obviously. But this is still one of the most brutal and unexpected defeats for any superhero, partly because Peter Parker is still only a teenager in this issue where he meets his fate. That, and partly also because his final battle takes place right outside of his house in front of his friends and family. Facing off against the Sinister Six in a multi-issue battle, Peter is entirely helpless, getting ravaged over and over again by the group of villains, and no one really comes to his rescue, other than Aunt May, who actually takes out Electro with a revolver. Spanning between issues 156 and 160 of Ultimate Spider-Man, this loss takes its time and ends with deafening silence as Aunt May and MJ cry over Peter's dead body, and the series just ends. It's a rough defeat that some people forget about, maybe because it's not from our dimension. But hey, it's still a young Spider-Man dying at the hands of a huge gang of bad guys, no matter which way you splice it.
Starting off our list with an honorable mention at number 10, we have Captain Carter. Normally, I'd put my girl Peggy higher up on any list, but since she's less weird and more awesome, we've gotta put her here. Captain Carter actually originally debuted in the Marvel Puzzle Quest video game during a celebration for Captain America's 75th anniversary, but was given a fully fleshed out backstory and has been a fan favorite ever since. In a universe where Steve Rogers is assassinated before he can be given the super soldier serum, Peggy Carter is instead the one who becomes an incredibly strong and iconic hero for the Allied forces. The comics would continue her adventures, with her universe's New York City coming under attack with nuclear weapons by the Red Skull, and eventually lead to her joining the superhero team the Exiles after their multiverse-spanning adventures brought them into contact. Next up on our list is the center point for one of the most controversial Marvel storylines of all time, the infamous Hydra Cap. Initially appearing to be the main Marvel Universe's Captain America, this version of Steve Rogers had grown up indoctrinated by Hydra's fascist ideologies and was actually sent to America to kill the creator of the superhuman serum for the Axis powers, but instead wound up deceiving his way into receiving the serum himself. Having wound up in the main Marvel Universe when their Steve Rogers was rejuvenated back to his usual age in a different storyline, this Hydra Cap was able to hide his evil intentions until the pivotal moment that he declared to the world those shocking words, "Hail Hydra." Seeing one of comics' most inspiring icons twisted in such a way was definitely unexpected, and definitely earns a surprising spot on this list. Coming in at number 8, we have the blood-sucking Vampire Cap. In a universe where Captain America fought and then lost against the villain Baron Blood, soon the entire Avengers team was overtaken by his vampiric disease. Consumed with a lust for both blood and power, this Steve Rogers began a year-long killing spree that culminated in killing Baron Blood and taking his place as the new Vampire King. This version had all of the benefits of the Super Soldier Serum, in addition to new vampire abilities such as healing so advanced, he was able to survive getting decapitated when facing off against several other Marvel heroes. I guess going for the head isn't as effective as we all thought.
And at 7, Phyla Vell. After Janice Vell, then known as Captain Marvel, previously destroyed and recreated the universe, the new version was subtly altered, with Phyla Vell's existence being one of the changes. Phyla Vell was the second artificially created offspring of Captain Marvel, who was created by her mother Elysius in the new universe because her first attempt, Janice Vell, had been so successful. She fought her brother, who was insane at the time, and in the process of helping to restore his sanity, she then tried to to claim the Captain Marvel title, though her brother refused to give it up. To save Rick Jones' girlfriend Marlo Chandler, Janice had to travel to the future to see what would be the cause of her future demise. He asked Phyla to stay behind on Earth to keep watch over Marlo, and in doing so she encountered the being known as Magus, who tried to kidnap Marlo. She and the telepath Moondragon foiled the plot, and Janice returned to Earth shortly after, telling her that he stopped a villainous plan to release Magus hundreds of years in the future, but wouldn't explain how. But like, bro, I just fought him, couldn't you have done that a little sooner? And at 6, AI Avengers. This android-based Captain Marvel was one of the many robotic versions of the Avengers created by Raz Malhotra, which were in turn inspired by Egghead and his AI Avengers. They were dispatched to fight off the Hulk and the forces of Hydra at the Mount, but were ultimately destroyed. But I mean, like, come on. An AI version of Captain Marvel is pretty weird, but honestly, based on what I talk about on Top 10 Gaming, it's par for the course for me. Halfway through into number 5, Genisvale. After a falling out with Captain America, Rick Jones found himself mentally drawn to a pair of extraterrestrial golden bracelets, the Nega Bands. Donning the bands, Rick slammed his wrists together with all of his might, and his atoms traded places with those of the exiled Kree Captain Marvel. Joined together, Rick and Captain Marvel lived a shared existence. During the epic Kree-Skrull War, Rick and Captain Marvel became pawns of the Kree Supreme Intelligence, who unleashed the untapped psionic potential of Rick's mind, the Destiny Force, to put an end to the war. Sometime later though, as a result of the exposure to deadly nerve gas, Captain Marvel perished from incurable systemic cancer. As Rick slowly began to move on with his life, eventually getting married, Marvel's love, Elysius, felt more alone than ever. Using Titanian science, Elysius sampled some of Marvel's genetic structure to conceive a child, Genis. To protect him from Captain Marvel's enemies, Genis was artificially aged to maturity and taken to an isolated world where he would be safe from harm. Upon discovering of his true lineage though, Genis donned wristlets modeled after the Negabands worn by his father and was determined to carry on his father's heroic tradition, eventually calling himself Captain Marvel. And at 4, William Marvel. William Marvel, also known as Billy Marvel, was the combination of both versions of Captain Marvel from both DC and Marvel in the shared amalgam Earth. This version of the character shares the powers of both Captain Marvel and Shazam from the DC universe, since originally Shazam was named Captain Marvel. This version of the character was also a member of the Judgment League Avengers and first appeared in JLX #1 from 1996. On this Earth 9602, he's actually a young boy who, when shouts the word Kree, transforms into a super scientifically enhanced adult hero. His fellow members of the Judgment League Avengers are not aware of the secret though. After Angel Hawk, Canary, and Goliath found Super Soldier, Captain Marvel soon joined and formed the Judgment League Avengers. He was then transported by Doctor Strange Fate with other members of the Judgment League to battle Thanoside. When Mariner was accused of blowing up oil freighters, the US government branded him an eco-terrorist, and Captain Marvel and other non-Metamutant members of the JLA captured him and imprisoned him without a trial. So kind of a little wishy-washy on the whole morals thing.
Number 3, Venom Hulk. Venom Hulk is as terrifying as you think. It all goes down in What If issue 4. It shows us what would happen if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man. So if the Fantastic Four hadn't have been able to separate Peter and the suit initially. It's a fun little alternative. It gets pretty ugly quickly, and the other Avengers are called upon to try and stop Peter from causing more irreversible damage. Doctor Strange is hurling spells at him for hours, still it's no use. And you'd think when the Hulk came along, he could just, huck Peter into a few walls until he calms down. But he arrives and the symbiote sees his power and he's like, that looks pretty good, I want that, gimme. And then when it comes into contact with the Hulk, this nightmare is born. When Thor comes in to hopefully try and end this disaster of a situation, he too is consumed by the symbiote. I really hope we get to see some sort of evil version of the Hulk in this What If Disney show. I mean, Venom Hulk would be amazing. I would love to see this issue on TV. Might be a little long shot, but maybe Grey Hulk perhaps, I don't know. Some sort of evil Hulk is coming, I feel it. Number 2, Lizard Hulk. Still green this time around, just a little more wet and scaly. He comes from Earth 19919. Robert Banner, of course, has a similar origin as the Hulk that we're now familiar with, only he was infected by the spider virus in Spider Island issue 1. So a little more this time around. Now he's got extra arms and he's even more powerful. just what you want. The Spider Queen at this point is standing tall over Manhattan, with the residents of New York City turning into spiders, which I gotta say, worst thing I've ever heard. I feel itchy just reading that. And as for our heroes, it's probably best if they switch to a different animal's DNA to avoid the whole mind control Spider Queen awful situation. So Captain America gets a hairy upgrade, and the Hulk gets paired with some lizard DNA, resulting in a weird but exciting storyline. Major Godzilla vibes over here. And finally, number 1, you guessed it, Old Man Logan. Remember that time that the Hulk was a landlord and had Hulklings with his cousin Jen Walters? Let's talk about it. Old Man Logan is an absolute masterpiece, first of all. Created by Mark Miller and Steve McNiven, we get to see a dark future where supervillains have taken over the United States. Bruce Banner ended up taking over California from Abomination and appropriately named it Hulkland. An atomic bomb over California changed Bruce up, he charged him, and now he wasn't this quirky scientist that you know and love. Now he's kind of a dick. Hulk Gang is also a treat. We have in total Bobby Joe, Charlie, Otis, Rufus, Bo, Elrod, Eustace, and of course Woody. Good old Woody Banner, what a gem. They come knocking on your door when you don't pay rent. Yeah, and you thought your landlord sucked. Think again. They're honestly evil, like they're literally evil. They killed Logan's family because they felt like it. They were bored. They whip around in style with the fantastic car, and then when Logan returned from his road trip with Hawkeye, well, he was a little upset to say the least. The only survivor once Logan was done with them was Billy Bob Banner.
And at 10, New Earth. Now, I'd like to say that technically New Earth is no longer the main continuity, since Prime Earth currently is, so I'm allowing New Earth Oliver to be on this list, okay? My list, my rules. New Earth Oliver is pretty badass, since in the 0 Hour storyline, after being thrust into another timeline where he stares at his own dead body, he gets pulled back and recruited by Batman to help in the fight against his once good friend Hal Jordan, who had recently gone mad thanks to Coast City being destroyed and then being possessed by Parallax. Oliver didn't want to believe it, but after seeing what Hal had become, he knew what he had to do. In the final battle, Oliver straight up shot Parallax in the chest, ending the battle and saving the universe. But Oliver was pretty messed up after this, understandably, because you know, he just killed his best friend. So Ollie returned to where he committed his first murder, because you know, that's great for your mental health, and swore off being a superhero, but obviously this wouldn't stick. Still pretty sick though. And at 9, Archer. Appearing in the animated movie Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, this version of Oliver Queen is the evil version who's a member of the crime syndicate. While he doesn't have much else going for him, being a match for the main Earth Oliver, he does have the moral advantage. You see, when you don't have a moral code, you can basically do anything, and that's what Archer experiences in this movie, even attempting to assassinate President Slade Wilson's daughter during a public speech. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Dressing in red so he can hide all the blood, this guy is willing to kill whoever he has to in order to survive, gain more power, or even just have a bit of fun. And that puts him at an advantage over good Oliver, because he could easily put someone's life in danger as a distraction, and it would work. If you're enjoying this list and want to see more like it, why don't you hit those shiny like and subscribe buttons? It really helps us out and can make a huge difference. Okay, let's keep going. And at 8, Injustice. While the Dictator Superman universe version of Green Arrow dies brutally after accidentally shooting John Kent, the Earth 1 version of Green Arrow ends up being summoned by the Evilverse Batman to take down the crazy Superman. But in this reality, there is a pill that the Joker calls the Happy Pill, at least in the game, that increases their resistance to attacks, luckily making it slightly harder for Superman to kill this version of Oliver Queen. This pill does make him more powerful than his original and Archer counterparts, so that's why he's on this list, especially because everyone on Evil Man Earth is like, oh damn, Oliver Queen is back? How did that happen? I mean, like, it's pretty normal for Oliver, I guess. He's basically, at this point, one of DC's Jesuses, but still, I'm sure that made at least some people question Superman's true power, but it probably didn't last for long, because if it did, they would get their heads blown off or like heat vision through their skull. Do you think Superman plays golf with human heads? I'd like to think so. 4.
Number 7, Gotham City Garage Nightwing. Nightwing in this reality is known for fixing up bikes and wearing a leather jacket with no shirt underneath. Sounds pretty sweaty to me. He is recruited to help break into Lex Luthor's compound by Catwoman, and the pair of them are also joined by Kara. His skills here don't just include fighting and acrobatics, but also his driving skills, which are pretty impressive. Aside from that, Nightwing also has his tricked out bike, which adds to his power set. In this reality, he is rivals with Jason Todd, who himself gets his butt whooped by Kara. Nightwing in this reality is different in the sense that he is more selfish than his main continuity counterpart, and is willing to leave others behind in order to save himself. Number 6. Damian Wayne. What would an alternate Robin list be without a few of the main continuity Robins, of which we have a plethora of alternates already, as the role has changed hands throughout the years. I'm not going to list all of the Robins here, so if there's one that you're a huge fan of and I don't list them, please don't be offended, but I am going to mention a few that I just think are the most powerful and deserve to be mentioned, with some powerful Robin alternates from other realities and Elseworlds peppered in the mix there. Damian, of course, being one of those main Robins that I would like to talk to you about. Damian Wayne is another Robin who initially didn't have a problem with killing his opponents. This is due to the fact that he was raised among the League of Assassins, in part training with his mother, Talia al Ghul, herself a masterful and accomplished assassin and fighter. Damian has recently left the Robin mantle and his father's side to seemingly find himself in his own new Robin series. Although the series is called Robin, Damian claims to have turned his back on the bad and is looking to find out who he really is outside of his father's shadow, turning to his mother for some guidance this time around, and also looking inside himself. Which I think, Damian's still pretty young, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Number 5. Deathlock. Deathlock is the Amalgam Universe version of Jason Todd. He is a combination of DC's Jason Todd, who was once known as Robin, Marvel's Midnight, and Marvel's Deathlock. In the Amalgam Universe, however, his name still remains Jason Todd, just to be clear. Jason was caught in an explosion and recovered by the villainous organization Hydra, who healed him and repaired him by turning him into a cyborg, making him into their agent and Deathlock. But prior to this, Jason was already a skilled fighter, albeit somewhat reckless, taking up the mantle of Moonwing when he worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. after Dick had left the mantle and S.H.I.E.L.D. to go attend university. However, Jason would later be dismissed from S.H.I.E.L.D. after making a grievous mistake while on duty, a mistake that even as Deathlock he still blamed his superiors for, confronting both Dick Grayson and S.H.I.E.L.D. director Bruce Wayne during a fight later on. Number 4. Jason Todd. When it comes to Jason Todd, he is powerful because he doesn't often hold back and he doesn't really give up. While he may have trauma that sometimes can leave him vulnerable, his redefinition of the Bat Family moral code means that he's a touch more ruthless than your standard Robin. Okay, maybe a lot more ruthless. At least more ruthless after he left the mantle of Robin and became Red Hood. However, even during his time as Robin, Jason was a determined young man who, even when beaten, would never back down or give up in a fight. Currently, however, Jason is also a masterful sword fighter and weapons expert who is not afraid to kill those who get in his way, which is kind of what gives him an edge, I think, in comparison to some of the other Robins.
Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Blackest Night. The Black Lantern Corps is a group of various dead superheroes and villains alike who are raised by Necron and each given a Black Lantern ring. This ring grants them power over death, and these rings are powered by the Anti-Monitor, as he is present within the Black Lantern power battery. Those raised by the Black Lantern ring are in essence resurrected to where they were before, but with their minds warped to serve Necron's purpose. Those with the ring have various powers, including a healing factor, aura recognition, which allows them to see powerful emotions, energy spectrum assimilation, which lets them extract the hearts of individuals they've slain and use their last feelings to charge the central battery and their ring by 0.01%, and they, much like zombies, can infect others by biting them. A bite from a Black Lantern will slowly kill the one bitten and would turn them into a Black Lantern upon death. Basically zombies with superpowers, so definitely not something to be laughing at. Penultimately, and at number 2, the Spectre. While I really wanted to put this at number 1, I knew at least a few of you would be mad at me for it, so here we are at number 2. The Arrowverse crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths had been in the process of being set up for a while, with the previous Elseworlds crossover basically just being one big commercial for it, and the seasons of the shows leading up to it mostly revolved around what would happen. One of these main issues was Oliver Queen's death, which shockingly was carried out in the first part of the crossover. After bringing Oliver Queen back to life with a Lazarus pit on Earth 19, John Diggle, his daughter from the future Mia, and Constantine all travel to Purgatory to retrieve his soul. But when he was about to go back with them, Jim Corrigan arrives with a way for Oliver to save everyone. This turns Oliver into the Spectre, basically the most powerful being in the multiverse, or one of them at least, giving him the powers of God, allowing Oliver to reboot the universe with the help of the Paragons, and stopping the Anti-Monitor from securing the death of all Earths. He also ended up corrupting the Speed Force by empowering Barry, which resulted in the Speed Force dying for a time. This really should be number 1, but whatever. Finally, in at number 1, Brightest Day. After Hal Jordan absorbed the entity of life, he spread its power over multiple superheroes, some of who were Black Lanterns at the time. This included the Green Arrow, which fully resurrected him. And a white power ring is certainly the most powerful ring of them all. One ring to rule them all. being able to generate and use any color from the spectrum, since white light is all the other colors combined. This allows White Lanterns to in essence have near godlike abilities with all the colors. White energy blasts, force field generation, energy constructs, energy twins, ring duplication, mind alteration, wormhole generation, time travel, invisibility, resurrection, you name it and the White Lanterns can do it. The full extent of the white power ring is unknown, so honestly, this is the only thing I saw fit to beat the Spectre if anything. I mean, the white power ring may not be able to reboot the universe, but hey, we don't know if it could. It can resurrect people, so why not resurrect planets, right? I mean, probably. Hopefully that's not too big of a leap in logic. And at 10, Poison. Poisons are a species of crystalline extraterrestrials spawned by the Poison Queen. Originating on Earth 17952, the Poison spends an unknown amount of time as prey for larger, stronger creatures before discovering that they could assimilate symbiotes and their hosts to become more powerful. Poison Captain Marvel was the Poison who assimilated venomized Captain Marvel of Earth 81622. Poison Captain Marvel attacked D-Man and Rage on Manhattan Bridge alongside Poison Killer Thrill, Poison Hyperion, Poison Gamora, and Poison Thing in order to attract more powerful heroes. Kind of a burn. This attack led to the creation of Poison D-Man, Poison Rage, and Poison Thor. However, this poison most likely died along with the others when the Queen was killed by the time-displaced Jean Grey. And at 9, Imposter. Part of a training program with the intent of eventually replacing Earth's heroes, this Skrull was permanently turned into a copy of the Kree warrior Mar-Vell, to avoid any possible detection. However, a problem emerged when the real Mar-Vell died, so this Skrull was no longer useful in the training program, and he couldn't really return to his true form, preventing him from returning to his normal life. However, he wasn't just going to lie down and die, so the Skrull allied himself with 2 other Skrulls in the same situation, posing as the deceased heroes of John Proudstar and Adam Warlock. After some time, they had a run-in with Kitty Pryde, who they mistook for her Skrull imposter and then took prisoner. But realizing that she was the real deal and that Galactus was about to arrive, they let her go and joined forces with her and Wolverine in an attempt to save their people and the X-Men. The Skrull was ultimately gunned down by another Skrull when he attempted to stop a Skrull general from keeping people from getting on board a spaceship, I'm guessing to evacuate. And it ate Rogue. When Rogue touched Ms. Marvel to absorb her powers, Carol grabbed onto her arm and didn't let go. So in addition to Carol's Kree DNA glitching up Rogue's powers, the prolonged contact caused each to end up absorbing the powers, memories, and personality of the others. They kinda swapped places. Rogue sought out Professor X's help, and afterwards she was sent to space as a consequence of an encounter with Brood. Rogue and Carol Danvers were briefly visited by Carol's counterpart from the Prime Marvel universe using the powers of the Reality Stone, since the gem links her to the other wielders of the gem in other realities, and they can all kinda like communicate, with the wielder of this Earth being Anna Marie. They talked about the differences between their lines before the visiting Carol was pulled to Earth 70875. But yeah, Rogue having Carol Danvers' powers. That's actually pretty weird.
Number 7, Ultimate Hulk. This version of Bruce is quite troubled. He was taught to just stay out of his parents' way growing up, and he also hated himself, pretty much. He wanted to be ripped like Captain America, he didn't like his noodle arms, it was a rough go for him in the Ultimate Universe. So when Nick Fury got together the brightest minds to recreate the Super Soldier Serum, Envious Banner was on that team. He did figure it out, or so he thought, but he kept the info to himself. He didn't want any other scientist getting credit. But he took it a little bit too far when he also decided to keep the human testing process to himself as well. He injected himself and became Ultimate Hulk. The first time he changed, he injured Mary and Richard Parker, but down the road he injected himself again, but this time he mixed Super Soldier Serum with Hulk Serum, and then he turned to gray, and his first plan of attack was, of course, as you would think, to fight Freddie Prinze Jr. Yeah. Number 6, Infernal Hulk. First appearing in Deadpool Annual 1, this version picks up after Bruce Banner became the Sorcerer Supreme, and his first trick was to separate the Hulk from himself and just banish him as far away as possible. And what better place to throw him than the pits of hell? While in the land down under, Hulk became Infernal Hulk. A little more scary looking than Joe Fixit, just a little bit. So when our 616 banner arrived to this universe with Spider-Man, Infernal Hulk traded places in hell with the other Bruce's Hulk persona. So now that Infernal Hulk is free and he's going back after Banner. He's pissed. So Deadpool, Spidey, and Supreme Banner, they all figured, okay, let's just reverse this banishing spell, and then as soon as Banner shows back up, we break his neck. Alright, go team, let's do it. Number 5, Hulk 2099. John Eisenhart this time around made his first appearance in 2099 Unlimited issue 1 back in 1993. This is the future, of course, one of many alternate Marvel futures where heroes are simply no more. But fear not, as we still have cults. Thank God, you gotta have those cults. One cult called the Knights of Banner was piquing the interest of Eisenhart, but at this point, he was this LA movie studio guy and he wanted to make a movie about these knights or this Hulk cult or whatever. They're pretty much us in the future. They worship the Hulk, they have meetings, they talk about him, they probably create top 10 lists, I don't know. But when they turned down the money and said beat it, Eisenhart wasn't happy. So he tricked one of the young members, Gawain, into spilling the beans about the cult and how they're performing illegal gamma experiments. Gawain is actually a reference to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, an Arthurian story that combined the beheading game and the exchange of winnings. And that's exactly what happened here. John reported this cult and its new secrets, and the police raided and killed everybody. All but Gawain. So John tried to fix what he'd caused, but it was far too late. After a gamma bomb went off, he was turned into the 2099 Hulk. Consumed now with guilt as well, he vowed to protect the young knight, and when Draco killed Gawain, spoilers, he figured he would just defend the people from future threats. Number 4. Compound Hulk. First appearing in Hulk Volume 2, Issue 30, Clue is a smarter version of that Grey Hulk that I mentioned earlier in this list. He's an advanced clone, rather, created by Xemnu. Now, Clue was the result of a cloning gone wrong, classic, and then when Clue and Xemnu were fighting Red Hulk, Impossible Man came in, he was watching the whole thing, and he used his powers to merge both of those guys into the compound Clue. He didn't last long at all, but anytime the words merge and Hulk are in play, it's bound to get weird.
At number 3, we've got another character with a Dragon Ball Z style fusion in the form of Clark Kent, the Super Soldier. And no, this didn't suddenly switch over to a DC Comics themed video. In the Amalgam universe, where the Marvel and DC multiverses have been compressed and combined into one unified world by the megaversal beings known as the Brothers, Super Soldier is the result of mixing the backstories of both Captain America and Superman. Clark Kent is a young man from Kansas who winds up receiving his powers of strength, heat vision, and flight not from being a Kryptonian, but by volunteering for the Super Soldier program to help America during the Second World War, a process which is spied on by a very mischievous Jimmy Olsen. He would go on to fight the leader of Hydra, a version of Lex Luthor, and Super Metallo, a combination of Metallo and Red Skull's usual brand of killer robots. Double the trouble, double the fun. Coming in at number 2, we've got a version of Captain America that doesn't even need America. That's right, it's Captain Avalon. Coming from a Marvel universe inspired by classic sword and sorcery fantasy, this version of Cap is merely called Stevan until his son, funnily enough named Stevan Jr., is kidnapped by the Dreadlord, an evil alternate version of Baron Zemo. While he doesn't appear to have any actual magical abilities or equivalents to the Super Soldier formula, Captain Avalon is a brave knight at the peak of human condition, and his red and blue shield still brings the core of this classic character to light, even if America doesn't really exist in this Game of Thrones style world. And finally, coming in at the top spot for our weirdest alternate versions of Captain America, we have a choice that's not even human. That's right, it's Captain Americat. Hailing from Earth 8311, the very same world that's home to the spectacular Spider-Ham, this version of Cap is named Stephen Mouser, leads a group of superpowered animals known as the Scavengers, and in another groan-inducing animal pun, most notably led them into battle against the supervillain Moltron. While his appearances have mostly been related to side stories compared to Spider-Ham's main adventures, Captain Americat is definitely the oddest version of Steve Rogers that we've yet to see in the Marvel Multiverse.
Number 10. Gata. Gata is a famous pop star whose name is really Sheila Romero. Long after the Batman we know, Bruce Wayne, has died, there is a new Batman on the streets of Gotham. This Batman, unfortunately for Gata, is hogging all the media and press coverage. Taking this unintended slight quite personally, Gata sets out to get revenge on Batman, becoming the new Catwoman. In the end, however, she does fall into the standard trap of many other alternate and main continuity versions of the character, falling in love with Batman while trying to beat him. So although she starts out as a more evil, villainous type, by the end of the story, she's on the side of good, alongside her once enemy, Batman. Number 9. Batman Returns. In the Tim Burton universe turned Joel Schumacher universe that all started with the Batman 1989 film, we get introduced to the film's very own Selina Kyle. This version of the character is portrayed by Michelle Pfeiffer, who seemingly rises from the dead, surviving a very deadly fall from a high-rise office building window. This version of Catwoman is hell-bent on getting revenge on her old boss, Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken, who tried to kill her after she learned of his villainous plans to steal Gotham's power. Selina ends up dating Bruce, not knowing that he is Batman to start. There are later indications in following films and television series that followed this that those two actually end up together and have a daughter named Helena, implying that this version of Catwoman inevitably does change her criminal ways, reforming and ending up partnered with Bruce permanently. However, in the film Batman Returns itself, Catwoman is really only known for being a villain, even if you do perhaps understand her motives and feel that she might be justified in her actions. At least a little bit justified, I think. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Catwoman lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I love talking about Catwoman, so I'd love to do more Catwoman lists. I don't know how many evil alternate versions of her are left, though. This was hard to find these ones. Really had to think about it. Number 8. Earth -22. While we don't know much about this version of Catwoman, we do know that she was one of the victims that was killed by the Joker during his final hurrah after he had learned that he was dying. At least the Joker of Earth -22, which is part of the dark multiverse. Catwoman in this reality was both an ally and an enemy of Batman, and Joker went on a rampage killing all of Batman's rogues, which was part of what pushed Bruce to the breaking point and caused Batman to snap Joker's neck in a blind moment of rage. This version of Catwoman, while likely a criminal, also had a tragic fate that played a role in helping to create one of the most evil versions of Batman ever, the Batman who laughs.
And at 7, Goliath. Goliath is the Amalgam Universe version of Oliver Queen and Goliath. While not really an archer, Goliath does have the Marvel Universe's Goliath powers, including the ability to grow and shrink. What makes him part Oliver Queen is his relationship to Canary, which parallels to Goliath and Mockingbird's relationship in the Marvel Universe. First introduced in JLX number 1 in 1996, I'm sure you can see why Goliath would be a powerful version of Green Arrow. Actually, while learning about this character, I decided to move him up quite a bit, because being able to grow or shrink at will instead of needing to wear a suit like Ant-Man is certainly a power that is scary to deal with, especially with the basic invulnerability that he has thanks to Goliath. The only thing that really makes him Oliver Queen though is his name and his relationship to Canary, so that's why he's higher up on the list. And at 6, Roy Harper. Now, while Roy Harper may be younger and more naive than Oliver Queen, he does become quite the respectable superhero in his own right, and has gotten through some serious issues, including multiple substance abuse issues, which is inspirational to say the least. While also being an expert archer, Roy is an excellent acrobat and has been shown as an expert mechanic and engineer, designing and building his own trick arrows as well as trick arrows for Oliver, not to mention additional weapons, robots, and defense systems. He's also been shown as quite the expert hacker, and was able to jailbreak his phone and give it voice recognition. Roy Harper invented Siri, guys. Aside from that, the Arrowverse version of Roy was also given a dose of Mirakuru and survived, turning him into a living weapon much like Slade Wilson. While the Mirakuru was in his system, Roy was able to punch through a shipping container that was bullet and explosion proof, not to mention the healing factor he gained, and the ability to punch through brick without ironically breaking a sweat. Although this came with its own set of issues, including anger management problems, which isn't good when your mentor has just sworn off killing. Not to mention the one time Roy in the comics had a Black Lantern ring in the Blackest Night storyline. Halfway through, and at number 5, Flashpoint. Flashpoint Oliver is an interesting case here, because while he is on the side of good, he's more on the side of profit. Leading a band of ex-military operatives he calls the Green Arrows, Oliver runs a business where he steals advanced gadgets and weapons from villains and refurbishes them for military use, which honestly makes him pretty damn powerful. If he can not only acquire these weapons, but also if he used them, he could be considered one of the most powerful non-superpowered individuals in the Flashpoint timeline. But I also like to consider the fact that just because Barry's mom didn't die, Oliver isn't as much of a do-gooder as he is in the main timeline, or that just because Barry's mom didn't die, Bruce Wayne is the one who dies in the alley. It's incredible to me, honestly. This version of Green Arrow was introduced in Flashpoint Green Arrow Industries number 1 in 2011, and this one is definitely on my read list. I'm probably gonna pull it up when I get home because this is really cool, even if it is slightly concerning.
And at 4, Connor Hawke. Connor Hawke is the son of Green Arrow and Sandra Hawke, and takes over the Green Arrow mantle after his father's death. When introduced in Green Arrow Volume 2 Number 0 in 1994, he appeared to just be a huge fan of the Green Arrow, but it was later revealed that, unbeknownst to Oliver, Connor was in fact his son. It feels fitting that it's my name now, honestly. And while he may share the same skills as his father, although less evolved, Connor does end up gaining a couple powers over his father, one of them being a healing factor, granted to him due to genetic mutations from Dr. Savannah, this giving him also a higher resistance to pain. This also allows him to stay at his prime with ease, much like Logan, and thanks to Connor's Zen training, he was able to develop a form of clairvoyance. This is the ability that gave him a vision of his father still alive, despite the world thinking that he was dead. See, he has a reason to be on this list other than us just sharing names, okay?
Number 3, Maggie Kyle. Maggie Kyle is known for being Catwoman's sister. In the main continuity, she was tormented by Black Mask to the point that she basically lost her mind and had kind of a psychotic break. Inevitably, what happened was she was made to consume pieces of her husband after she watched him being ever so slowly killed by Black Mask. Yikes. In the reality referred to as Earth Whatever, it was Selina who was Black Mask's victim, and Maggie was the one who avenged her as Catwoman. Maggie was also very specific with the kind of revenge that she wanted and got when it came to Black Mask, killing him slowly, tormenting him as he had her sister in this reality, Selina. Maggie also seemed to relish what she had done, smiling gleefully about it. Part of what makes this version of Catwoman, Maggie's Catwoman, so evil here is what she did to Black Mask. The manner of it specifically, and of course her reaction to that act. She seems like really creepily happy about it. Number 2, Female Fury Catwoman. While Holly Robinson as Catwoman wasn't necessarily evil, like Holly Robinson herself isn't very evil, there was a period during her time as Catwoman where she was really evil. This wasn't necessarily her fault, as she had basically been captured and brainwashed by Darkseid into becoming one of his female furies. This all went down during Final Crisis, when Darkseid had become the master of the anti-life equation and used it to basically enslave Earth, bending its inhabitants to his will, Holly Robinson's Catwoman included. And if you're wondering why Holly became Catwoman in the first place, it actually all started because Selina Kyle learned that she was pregnant and she was planning on retiring and kind of disappearing for the sake of her future baby. Of course, that didn't all go according to plan, because obviously Selina is still in the comics and is Catwoman, so yes. And she doesn't like just have a baby strapped to her, or like a kid running around her ankles with her while she fights. It'd be hard to fight if you had to like bring your kid to work with you. You probably just shouldn't be a superhero if you have to do that. You should call someone and get a babysitter. Number 1, Raina Creel and her copycat Catwoman army. In the main continuity, Raina Creel was actually an impersonator of Catwoman, or rather, she created a whole team of people to impersonate Catwoman, and she was the one that was in charge of it. And this criminal gang that she created was exclusively made up of copycats who all wore Catwoman's older suit design. Raina was introduced after Batman and Catwoman's wedding was called off, and Catwoman went off to do some of her own things outside of the Bats and Gotham Shadows, taking up residence in Villa Hermosa in California during the start of her own 2018 solo series. Catwoman here faced off against a whole massive group of other Catwomen who are all seemingly hired by Raina Creel to carry out villainous and illegal deeds on her behalf. I just think this is such like a cool idea for a story, and also there's some really good covers from that story. Some really great covers in there.
Number 10, Squirrel Girl. This one's a bit of a stretch because Deadpool didn't seem to be trying when the pair fought, but the fact remains that she did beat him. Plus, Squirrel Girl rocks, so it's going on the list. As we saw in Cable and Deadpool number 30, Squirrel Girl was able to scratch, whack, and otherwise pummel Deadpool into the ground. You may say, well, yeah, but Deadpool spent the whole time trying to figure out her name, and that's true. But hey, she was just exploiting one of Wade's major weaknesses, distractibility. Number 9, Moon Knight. Moon Knight is really cool. I'm a big old fan. And not only has he defeated Deadpool before, but he beat him 2 issues in a row in Vengeance of the Moon Knight number 7 and 8. Now, the first time was a bit less legit because Wade was distracted by a hot nurse, but issue 8 has a funhouse fight that proved much more clearly that Moon Knight can hold his own against the guy. Even in a house of mirrors, Moon Knight was able to slice and dice his way to victory. Number 8, Black Panther. Black Panther is a pretty great adversary to Deadpool for a few few reasons. For one, he's an excellent fighter, both armed and unarmed. He also has a number of superhuman abilities like strength and agility, which would prove advantageous against the lesser abilities of Deadpool. Most importantly though, Black Panther has been proven to be able to mostly ignore the annoying ramblings of the Merc with a mouth. He's shown that he can better Deadpool in combat, beating him up and chucking him out a window in Deadpool 15, and for that, he's going on the list.
Number 6. Tim Drake. Recently, Robin, Tim Drake, had a big glow up. He came out as bisexual and was celebrated in his very own Pride issue. However, even the fact that the character seems to be coming up more into his own and uplifted for his sense of identity could not protect him from an awful demise that was just around the corner. Enter Batman issue number 125. Here, Batman and Robin go up against Penguin and come face to face as well with Clayface. But what makes it even worse is while they were attempting to evacuate a charity gala whose attendees' lives Penguin was threatening, Robin got taken out by a goon with a gun. Just a goon with a gun. Ugh, brutal. While Robin would be stabilized, it was pretty shocking to see a character who had recently been so celebrated for identity and diversity taken out so easily and on the brink of life or death. Also, note to self, never attend a charity gala in Gotham. It pretty much never ends well.
Captain Marvel, or Marvel, the dude one. This is sort of a sad entry because he isn't defeated by any one villain, nor does he come back from it like some others may on this list. The culprit in this case is actually cancer. I don't know what happened in 1982, but this event was also published in 1982 like the Elektra thing, and was actually known as the first graphic novel to be released by Marvel. It was called The Death of Captain Marvel, of course, and it chronicled the adventures of Marvel venturing into a dark dimension where he's exposed to Compound 13, which is a nerve gas that gives him an incurable cancer. He's then visited by friends on the planet Titan, even getting a courtesy convoy sent over by the Skrulls, who pay their respects in his final moments. The craziest part about this is that Captain Marvel doesn't ever come back, save for one time when the Grandmaster brings him back briefly as a kind of ghost, but other than that, he's known to be out of the comics for good after this one. Sad.
Number 4. Captain Kate. One of the most shocking defeats and demises happened not really to just Kate, but also to Lockheed. Poor Lockheed. Not Lockheed, leave Lockheed alone. This all went down in volume 1 of Marauders from 2020. At the end of issue number 6, Kitty Pryde faces off with Sebastian Shaw, who while considered to be a mutant who is allied with the nation of Krakoa, and so in that respect is technically a hero, I guess, has also a history of being a really nasty villain. And that is exactly what he was up to here. He kills Kate in cold blood by exploiting her weakness that at the time she struggled to phase through Krakoan organic material and gates. So he found some fast growing vine pods and unleashed them on her while trapping Lockheed in a net, which he then dropped into the sea, and then promptly sinking the boat she was aboard. One of the worst things about this too is Kate is even like, look, you can have all the seats on the Hellfire Trading Company. I don't care, just please let me save Lockheed. And Shaw's like, no. Considering that Kate was basically the main character of this series who possibly could not be resurrected, it was pretty shocking at the time. I was shocked. I was very shocked.
Number 3. Wolverine. Wolverine is a great adversary for Deadpool for a number of reasons. His regenerative abilities are comparable to those of Deadpool, he's as hot-headed as Deadpool is juvenile, and to top it off, Wolverine has a Muramasa blade that can counteract Deadpool's healing factor. Assuming Logan doesn't get himself blown up before he reaches Deadpool, he'd have a pretty good chance of beating him, and even killing him. Granted, Wolverine doesn't have the best track record against Deadpool, but I think he got kinda shafted in their fights. I believe in you, Logan. Number 2. Rogue. This one may come as something of a surprise to some of you, and to others it'll seem pretty obvious. Rogue, of course, has the ability to take the powers of other supers. And should she come in contact with Wade, which would be pretty easy considering the affection they share, she can take his powers from him, making him vulnerable to attacks. Granted, she probably wouldn't want to kill him and would have trouble if he was still immortal due to Thanos, but her power would definitely give her a significant edge against a depowered Deadpool. Some might be worried that his mental anguish might mess with her, but as we saw in Uncanny Avengers number 22, she can take it, referring to his mind as a palate cleanser after Red Skulls. Plus, honestly, even without taking his powers, with all Rogue's new powers, she could probably wipe the floor with them anyway. Number 1. The Hulk. When trying to think of heroes that could beat Deadpool, a good place to start is the heroes that Deadpool goes to when he wants to die. And the Hulk fits that bill perfectly. In Deadpool number 39, Deadpool was on the hunt for a way to die, and what better way than to be pulverized by a hulking mass of muscle. So he went to Bruce Banner and just annoyed him until Bruce punched him and made him straight up explode. One might argue that the fact that Deadpool was letting Hulk beat him disqualifies this one, but the fact that one punch could turn Wade into goo kinda shows that Banner could easily defeat him.